Alright, to sew up these bust darts, go ahead and grab your pins, and the first thing that you want to do is line up these 2 notches that we made at the end of our dart legs. Alright, once you have those lined up with each other, go ahead and place a pin. Alright, next, grab another pin and you're going to push it through the line that you made for your dart leg. And once you push it through, check on the other side to make sure that it's also coming out on the white line. If you see that it is not, like for me, for example, it is not coming out on my white line, that means I need to readjust this dart, because when you push the pin through, it should be coming through on your other line on the other side. So I'm going to try it again, pushing my pin through. And I see that I'm coming out on the opposite side on my white line. And then now I'm going to push the pin all the way through the fabric now. So I'm going to repeat that process, taking another pin, pushing it through my dart line, double checking to make sure I'm coming out on the other side, the white line as well. Alright, now we will take this to our sewing machine. We'll start at the top of our dart and stitch all the way down until we get to this dot here. Alright, go ahead and line up your needle with your dart line, the line that we made, and go ahead and lower your needle in your fabric, and we're going to stitch right on top of this line that we made. Begin sewing, back stitch. Alright, once you get to the end of the dart, go ahead and back stitch. Alright, once you have your dart sewn, go ahead and press it going downward. Next, go ahead and grab your back pattern pieces and lay them with the right sides facing up. Then take your pocket pieces and go ahead and lay them right on top. Alright, and then go ahead and lay your pockets right on top. Make sure that the right side of your pocket is touching the right side of your fabric. And you want to line up the top edge of your pocket with that side notch in with the pocket notch that we made. So remember, on this side seam there are 2 notches closer up top, and then in the waist area there is 1 notch for our pocket. So I'm lining up the top edge with that notch, and I'm going to pin in place. Next, what you want to do is continue adding pins to pin down this pocket. Alright, go ahead and grab your front pieces and lay the right sides facing up. Then grab your other 2 pockets, and we're going to lay these right sides together. Now what you want to do is do the same thing that we did for the back pieces. So you want to line up the top edge of the pocket with the notch that we have in our side seam. Alright, and now we will sew this pocket down in place using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, go ahead and line up the edge of your pocket with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Begin sewing, back stitch, sew all the way until you get to the end of the pocket and back stitch again. we need to do an ease stitch in the shoulder of our 2 back pieces. So to do the ease stitch, first you want to find the notch that's in the shoulder, and then you want to measure over 1/2 inch from that notch and place a pin. Then what you want to do from this pin, you want to measure over 2 inches and place another pin. Alright, so in between these 2 pins, we're going to run a basting stitch so that when we get ready to attach the back piece to the front piece, the shoulder is a little bit wider on our back piece, so we need to do an ease stitch. That way we'll pull the thread, and I'll show you how to do this. You'll pull the thread so that it meets up with the front pattern piece. So in between these 2 pins, we'll run a basting stitch. Alright, starting at the pin that you placed closest to the notch, I have my fabric lined up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Lower your needle. Actually change to a basting stitch. Lower your needle. Begin sewing. Back stitch. And stitch until you get to your other pin, but do not back stitch when you get to that other pin. Alright, I'm at my other pin. I'm just going to lift up my presser foot, not back stitching, and creating a long tail of threads and clipping. Alright, go ahead and press your pockets going outward on both the back pieces and on the front pieces. Next, what you're going to do is take the front piece. Right now I'm looking at the back piece and the right side is facing up. You want to take the front piece, lay it right on top, and we're going to match it up in the shoulder seam. So first what you're going to do is find that notch in the back piece and find the notch in the front piece and line those up with each other. Once they're aligned, go ahead and place a pin there to hold it in place. And then you can add an additional pin here on the end. Alright, so you can see that my back piece extends further than the front piece. So now what we want to do is pull these ease stitches a little bit. And you don't want to pull it too much, just enough so that when you lay your front piece on the top, now the corners line up with each other. And then you can go ahead and pin that down in place and add some additional pins. Right, and as you can see, I just pulled it just a little bit, not too much. You only want to pull those ease stitches to ease the back piece to the front piece. Now what we'll do is sew a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to attach these two, and you'll do the same thing on the other side. Alright, go ahead and line up this shoulder seam with 5/8 of an inch. Begin sewing, back stitch. Alright, next go ahead and grab your sleeves and grab your index card or your seam gauge. What you want to do is lay your sleeve with the wrong side facing up, and what we're going to do is hem our sleeve and also do an ease stitch in our sleeve. So in order to do the hem, what you want to do is take your index card And from the bottom, I measured up 1 inch and drew a line. Now you want to take this card and you want to fold up the bottom edge of your sleeve to meet that 1 inch line. And then you want to take your iron and press. And press. Then after you have pressed that in place, what you want to do is open it up and now take the edge, the bottom edge, and fold it in to meet that crease. And then fold it one more time. And then you will press that down in place. And then when we go to our machine, we will sew a 3/8 of an inch top stitch to hold this hem in place. All right, on the right side of your sleeve, go ahead and line up the bottom edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Begin sewing, back stitch, sew until you get to the end and back stitch again. On your sleeve, we made 3 dots at the top. So in between these 3 dots, we're going to do an ease stitch, which is 1 basting stitch. So we'll start at one of our, so I'm going to start at this dot here, and I'm going to back stitch and then keep sewing all the way around until I get to this dot here. But once we get to this dot, we will not back stitch. Alright, go ahead and line up the first dot, and I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and lower your needle, begin sewing and back stitch, and keep sewing until you get to the last dot, but do not back stitch. Passing up this middle dot. Alright, just got to the 3rd dot. I'm now going to back stitch, lifting up my needle and pulling out a tail of threads. Alright, next what you want to do is take the shirt piece and you want to open it up. So right here in this armhole area, we're going to attach our sleeve. So right now I'm looking at the front and the back, and the wrong side is facing up. And also on my sleeve, turn it over, the wrong side of my sleeve is also facing up. And before you attach your pocket, you want to make sure that your notches are aligned with each other. So on my sleeve, I have 1 notch here, and I have 2 notches here on the other side. You want to make sure that, you want to make sure that the 2 notches on this side of the sleeve line up with the 2 notches in the back piece, and that the 1 notch here in the sleeve matches up with the 1 notch here in the front piece. Alright, once you have the correct sleeve, you can now go ahead and pin that in place. So I'm connecting the 2 notches here with my sleeve and placing a pin. And I did pin those. I'm pinning those with the right sides together. And then you want to line up the notch over here on the other side with the right sides together. Next, what we're going to do is line up this dot that's in the center of our sleeve with the shoulder seam allowance. So with the right sides together, line that up and place a pin. Alright, next what we need to do, as you'll see, the sleeve piece does not fit in the sleeve area of our shirt. So what we need to do is pull those ease stitches that we made so that our sleeve will begin to fit. So what you want to do, you'll see that there are 2 strings. Now we're only going to pull one side of those strings. So begin to pull on that, and it'll create some gathers, and you're going to begin to move those gathers and gather up this sleeve so that we can ease it into our shirt. Now once you've pulled it, you can ease it into this area here. Now if you pulled it too much, then you can go ahead and release some of those ease stitches, but pull it enough so that it fits inside of this area. Once it fits nicely, you can go ahead and pin that in place. Now finish up this side. See if you need to pull your ease stitches. Alright, now we will take this to our machine and sew a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to attach our sleeve. Alright, go ahead and line up the edge with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and begin sewing back stitch. And it's okay to go very slow on this part. Now I'm probably going to speed it up in post-production and look like I'm going real fast, but I'm actually going really slow on this part. One tip, when I am sewing up this flat sleeve, I like to make sure that everything is nice and smooth underneath. So I'll be sewing, for example, and then I might pause and just make sure that everything is nice and smooth. So as I'm going around this curve, sometimes fabric can start shifting and bunching. So just make sure you take a hand and make sure that as you're sewing, none of the fabric has begun bunching up. Alright, after attaching the sleeve, I went ahead and removed those ease stitches that I made, and also I went ahead and finished off this edge with my serger, and then I pressed the sleeve, and then I pressed this seam allowance going toward the sleeve. So yeah, make sure you press all of that seam allowance going toward the sleeve. Alright, next we're going to sew up the side seam. So you can go ahead and pick up the shirt and then fold it. Make sure the pockets are coming out. So now I have right sides together. So right now the right side to the right side is together here, and line up the pockets with each other. Go ahead and grab your pins. The first place that we're going to pin is right here in the arm, in the underarm. You want to line up those 2 seams with each other and pin in place. Alright, and then you can continue adding pins along the sleeve. next thing you want to do is line up the pockets with each other. And I'm going to place a pin right up top here. I'm going to add some additional pins here on top of the pocket, above the pocket. Alright, and then now add some additional pins around the pocket. Next, we need to mark the notches in our pocket to help us when we're sewing. Alright, find that top notch that we made in the pocket and place a pin there. Then find the bottom notch that we made and place a pin there. And then the last thing that we're going to do is pin along the edge here. To do is, starting at the bottom of our shirt, we're going to sew all the way up until we get to that bottom notch in our pocket. Sew around and close up the pocket. Then we'll start a new stitch and we'll sew up our sleeve, come all the way around and sew down until we get to this top notch in our pocket, and then right here is where we will be inserting our hands. Alright, let's take this to our sewing machine and go ahead and do that. Starting at the bottom of the shirt, go ahead and line it up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, go ahead and lower your needle, begin sewing, back stitch, and keep sewing all the way up until you get to that bottom notch in the pocket. Alright, I'm getting close to my bottom notch in my pocket. So I'm going to keep sewing until I get to this pin. Alright, once you meet that point, go ahead and back stitch. Sew forward. And now leave your needle in your fabric. Lift up the presser foot and turn the pocket. Now lower your presser foot back down and continue sewing. And you want to make sure that your pocket is lined back up with 5/8 of an inch. And as I am sewing, I am pivoting my pocket around the curve. I am pivoting, using my hands to pivot to sew around this curve. Alright, starting at the bottom of the sleeve, go ahead and line it up with 5/8 of an inch. And we're going to sew this up until we get to that top notch in our pocket. So begin sewing and back stitch. Alright, once you reach that top notch, go ahead and back stitch. Sew forward and then back stitch. And go ahead and press your pocket going towards the front of your shirt. The pocket and the side seam going towards the front of the shirt.